All right, everyone. A very good morning once again to all of you. So, in the previous installment of this series on constitutional design, I had given you a very general overview of the concepts that we would be covering in this particular unit and how it is going to be very, very constitution centric, right? It is going to be focused on the constitution and the hows and the whys and the whats of it, right? If you have not seen the previous tutorial, I would strongly recommend to please go check out the previous tutorial so that you can make sense of what is to come. Right. So let us deep dive directly without wasting much time into the case study of this wonderful country called South Africa. We're going to explore South Africa's struggle against racism, against injustice, against apartheid, and how eventually they emerged victorious, right? And they drafted an independent constitution of their own and emerged as a shining example of democracy in the world, right? So, if you look at South Africa's history, right, South Africa, and in fact, if you remember that Gandhiji also went to South Africa, wherein he was kicked out of a train, right, when he was traveling first class. And he was kicked out of a train because apparently Indians, who were colored people, right, were not allowed to travel first class. And he had gone there to fight a case for his friend, and his friend had in fact booked a first class ticket for him. However, he was not allowed to travel first class, and that is what triggered this sentiment in him to fight against racial injustice in South Africa before eventually coming to India in 1914. Right. So again, if you see the history itself, so South Africa is a nation that is well known for its racial discrimination, for racism between the blacks and the whites, right? Wherein the whites particularly discriminate against the blacks, right? The entire Black Lives Matter movement, right, which very recently happened, is on the idea of racism itself. And apartheid, right, which was extremely prevalent. So this apartheid is a new term that somehow few might be coming across. It is nothing but it is the name of the system of racial discrimination. It was a name that was given to this system that was unique to South Africa. उसको हम apartheid बोलते हैं, उसका term है. So don't get confused, right? So again, if you go back a little further, you will realize that South Africa was a trading junction for the European companies to come and settle down. Right, they used to stop at South Africa while coming from Europe before going to Southeast Asia like Hong Kong or India for that matter, or Singapore, or you name it, right? So they used to halt at South Africa. So that is why South Africa became a major trading junction. So over the course of time, a lot of these Europeans came and a lot of these Europeans settled down. So I've written over here that a large number of whites, gore log na basically, right, whites settled down in South Africa and became the local rulers, right, obviously, because at that point of time the entire concept of colonialism was very popular, right. The occupying colonies was the trend, right. So South Africa was no exception, right. And of course, when these white people started settling down, they did what they did best. They started discriminating on the basis of color. They started discriminating against the local people who used to reside there. And the local people were, of course, the blacks, right? Because it's Africa we are talking about, right? They were the blacks. They were the ethnic groups, right? So, the system of apartheid divided the people and labeled them on the basis of their skin color, right? So, skin color is the discriminatory factor over here. Not your height, not your weight, not your eyesight, it is the skin color, right? मेरी बात समझ आ रही है, ठीक है. So the system of apartheid divided the people and labeled them on the basis of their skin color. And if you look at the general population of South Africa itself, the native people were blacks, right, obviously, and they comprised of almost 3/4 of South Africa's population. बात समझ आ रही है. तो अगर हम साउथ अफ्रीका का रेशियल प्रोफाइल देखें, मतलब कौन कौन से रेसेस, राइट, कौन कौन सी रेसेस सोसाइटी में एग्जिस्ट करती थी साउथ अफ्रीका में. सो यू विल फाइंड 3 टाइप्स. You will find the blacks, obviously, who are the ethnic groups. They are the majority. Then you will find the Europeans, who are the whites, who are the minority. And then there were people like Mahatma Gandhi who migrated from India. They were called colored. ठीक है, Indians are brown actually. Neither are we white nor are we black. We are called brown. ठीक है, we are brown people. So instead of using the term brown, they decided to use the term colored for us. तो blacks हैं, whites हैं और colored हैं हमारी तरह. ठीक है, clear. And of course, I don't think I need to mention this, that the apartheid system was brutally oppressive. ठीक है, whites treated blacks as inferiors. They did not have voting rights. Very obvious. Blacks were forbidden from living in white areas. So there was segregation, right? This is called segregation. मेरी बात समझ आ रही है? Segregate करना. Whites अलग रहेंगे, blacks अलग रहेंगे. वाइट का स्कूल अलग होगा, ब्लैक का स्कूल अलग होगा, वाइट का चर्च अलग होगा, ब्लैक का चर्च अलग होगा. दैट इज कॉल्ड सेग्रीगेशन. प्लीज, वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. ऑलराइट, इट इज कॉल्ड सेग्रीगेशन, राइट. And if, for instance, the blacks had to work in any white area, they needed some sort of a license. They needed to have a permit, some sort of a license. मेरी बात समझ आ रही है? So that is what I've written here also. That trains were separate, swimming pools were separate, public toilets were separate, schools were separate, colleges were separate, right? And it is called segregation, as I have mentioned right here. Am I being clear? ठीक है, it is called segregation, right? And of course, to the extent कि भगवान के लिए भी अलग rules थे, that blacks could not visit churches where the whites worshipped. So not allowed, right? Not allowed. ठीक है, not allowed. And typical oppression, right? Again, this is a no-brainer. I mean, you do not really have to. You can think very logically about it and you can come up with some very intelligent ideas of your own, right? You don't have to sit and mug this. It's a very obvious thing. Okay, so blacks did not have political rights. You still see this happening in the United States even today, right? The entire Black Lives Movement was based around this, so you're aware, right? It's not something that is very alien to you all, right? So they didn't have political rights, no voting rights, could not form associations against this terrible treatment. Political parties were illegal, of course, so on and so forth. Right, so this is a general background, right? What I have just told you is the background, it is the context. Okay, what I have just told you is the background or the context, right? Now let us move ahead to the actual fight against apartheid, right? Acha. So this struggle against apartheid has been going on ever since 1950s, right? When the blacks and the color, in fact even before that, but since the 1950s it took off on a much larger scale, right? So blacks and the colored people fought against apartheid. They launched protests and strikes, very typical. Like just like the Indian National Congress fought for India's independence, the African National Congress, the ANC, हमारा INC था, उनका ANC था, ठीक है? African National Congress had led the struggle against segregation, right? They were the ones who were protesting, they were the ones who were leading the movement, right? And the African National Congress was led by a beautiful, humble, and a very, very intelligent man. You have heard his name, called Nelson Mandela. Everyone has heard his name. There is not a single person who might not have heard his name. Nelson Mandela, right? He was the leader of the African National Congress. He was sent to jail for 28 years by the ruling authorities, right? So he stayed in jail for most of the period of time. And of course, apart from this, there was some some whites as well who had a certain degree of consciousness, who were a little sensitive, who joined the ANC to support the blacks. Right, just like India also, there were some British people who supported the Indian independence movement, who were sympathetic to the cause of the Indian freedom struggle, right? And apart from that, since this is very modern, yeah, I mean it's very dynamic, it's very modern. We are talking about the later half of the 20th century. So there was a global impact as well. So several countries also raised their voices against apartheid, including India, because India had a similar story just like South Africa, right? So India also raised their voice against this, against the system of apartheid. It was unjust, it was racist, right? They condemned it, right? However, the white government continued to rule by torturing, detaining, and killing hundreds of black and colored people. So, initially, it did not really affect them because for any supreme authority, they need to maintain their supremacy by hook or by crook, right? That is the entire agenda, that is the entire idea, right? That is the entire idea. So they continue to do that for the longest period of time. Am I being clear? So this was basically the fight against apartheid, right? So we're gonna stop here, right, for this particular tutorial. Okay, we're gonna stop here, and when we come back the next time, we will continue our story on South Africa in the very next tutorial, wherein we will discuss how the constitution came into existence and what were the forces behind its realization. Okay, I hope this was a helpful tutorial. Please do ensure that you're writing notes, and please do reach out in case of any queries. Right, thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye bye.